It's impossible, right? And it's a crisis because
Mm.
when there is not childcare, then people are not entering the workforce. When there is not affordable and accessible childcare, people are reconsidering having children. That is like directly impacts the economy, right? It directly impacts our ability to like grow as a society. It's like this is a crisis. And I hope that more people are seeing that.
Mhm.
My hope too is that, there have been if we just talk about the state of New Hampshire, right? I think the state of New Hampshire has created a child care task force because they recognize that this is a crisis. But some of the recommendations for making things better have been to increase ratio sizes, right? Or to expand access to the amount of children that in-home childcare providers can take on in addition to their own children.
Hello and welcome to the And Both podcast. Here we are going to hear from moms and those in motherhood that are doing the thing that works for them. They are honoring themselves alongside the all-encompassing role and level of expectation that is modern motherhood. And we are going to hear from as many different people as possible in their own experience. So you can find people to relate to. You can hear stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, all of the above, and that we will come together as a community to support one another in a way that is holistic and honoring of the woman and the mother as a whole. Welcome back to another episode of the And Both podcast. Today in the studio, Tara Ryan joins me to talk about the value of caregiving and how valuing caregiving is going to help elevate the conversation around care, services, access, assistance in all different levels. So to tell you a little bit about her before we get started, after 11 years in software sales where she led and scaled teams, Tara decided to pursue her dream of entrepreneurship. Her passion for deep self-reflection, growth, and equity drove her to become a certified professional coach, leadership development consultant, Fair Play certified facilitator, and activist for valuing care. She works to create radically inclusive and equity-minded environments where everyone is encouraged to show up authentically. She is such a breath of fresh air and enthusiasm in the care space. Tara and I met at a Chamber of Mothers event in Boston ahead of the New Hampshire chapter launch that she is the co-facilitator for. So we dive into a lot of topics around the value of care and the importance of care. And there's a lot of really great people doing really great work in this space, and she's definitely one of them. So thankful to have her join us today. I am here today with Tara Ryan. Tara, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ashley. It's like a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I love it. So you and I met at a Chamber of Mothers meetup in Boston. And then I think that there's a lot of overlapping things in both of our professional and personal experiences. And so I'm really excited for you to be here today to talk about, well, all of your and both things. So if you want to start off, just give a little intro, tell people who you are, what you do, and then take it from there.
I love it. Thank you. I know I especially love how we met each other. And it was so cool because we were at the Boston event, but both of us live in New Hampshire. And so now we have the opportunity to connect on that level too. So as you mentioned, my name is Tara Ryan, and I am a certified professional coach and Fair Play Method certified facilitator. That's kind of my paid work, but I am also a mother and a wife, a partner. I am a daughter, a sister, an activist, all the things, right? And really, a lot of what I do centers around this concept of creating a society, culture, places that is really, if I were to be able to kind of sum it all up, that is what I care most about.
I love that because I think that there's so much, there's so much awareness that is emerging about something that has needed to have awareness of for, I don't know, a couple centuries or like ever. And so I think that it's just really, it's about time is
Yeah.
like the long and short of it, right? So I just went, you and I were just talking about this. I just went to this care summit in San Francisco, and it is people that are creating all of these pieces to try and acknowledge the care economy and the importance and the value that care has on the actual economy. And it's just like that overwhelming, like you and I sitting at the Chamber of Mothers meeting together, and me being there, and you in your work with Fair Play is like we're all coming at it from the vantage point of like it's about time that we acknowledge the like monstrous role that care is in our life, and the importance of like you can't do what you want to do if somebody is not taking care of your kids, your aging family members, you're not taking care of yourself, all of that. So I think that I think it's amazing. I think that, you know, like the more ways we can interject this like other side of the coin into these conversations, the better off.
And to your point, right? It's the foundation of everything. Like we don't exist. We can't actually make things happen in this world if we are not whole and well ourselves, and care is the major components of that. And I think one interesting thing that I've learned and I've actually had to and I've had the opportunity to do that through my work at Fair Play is around how care is connected to how we value time. And
Mm,
so many of us think of like time is money, you know, this like concept that if you are not using your time to be productive or to earn dollars, it's not as valuable as the time spent, I don't know, playing or caring for someone or making dinner or cleaning the house or bathing your child, right? And so that concept of us like not valuing that time is a big contributor, in my opinion, to why we have a society that doesn't necessarily value care in the way that I wish it did at this point, but I'm working to change.
yeah.
Was there a concept that was brought up at that conference? I'm curious.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like another big one that people talk about all the time is like care has no value unless you have to pay somebody to do the thing that you assume you are someone else is going to do. So like, I mean, typically in like a heteronormative relationship where, you know, dad goes to work and he makes money and so his time is important, right? Like you hear it all the time like I get up with the baby at night because my husband has to go to work in the morning and he's got to be able to do that. Or like I'm just a stay-at-home mom or whatever. And it's like the it's bringing the level of one up at the expense of the other when really they're on the same level. And so
Exactly.
you can't, I mean, like I have maybe mentioned this a few times in my own personal life where I'm like, if I don't go to work in my job, but also I work from home, but if I don't do the job of taking care of the kids, you can't leave the porch and
Right.
go to do your job, right? Like you can't,
Exactly.
one has to work so that the other works. And just because there's no dollar sign attached to it, in terms of like somebody handing you a check at the end of the week, it doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't contributory to your home, to your family, to the economy, all of that.
Yes. And exactly. And it's just calling out, right? Like being unafraid to call out when people are using language like I'm just a stay-at-home mom
Mhm.
or my partner has to work in the morning. It's encouraging people to pause, right? And say, hey, you know, let's think about that for a second, not from a lens of judgment, but just like curiosity to be
Mhm.
like, okay, you know, yes, your partner is going to get up, leave the home, go do work and get paid for it. But what are you doing? Right? How would you describe what you are doing as well? And that that is the toughest work that exists, right? Like you are 1000% working. Maybe you are not getting paid for it, right? In a lot of
Hmm.
cases, but that is work. And it's just as valuable as the work that is happening for the paid dollars. So I think it's just pausing and helping people see that so
Yeah.
that we don't use the language that is so common in our society to minimize that type of work.
Hmm. Agreed. And I also like the idea that it seems like the language is also shifting around instead of, I think for a long time, this was parenting. And so it's really easy for people to say, well, I don't have kids. So like, I don't have to think about that stuff. However, given the experience of the pandemic, right? Like when everything was all of the veils in Oz came crashing down, all of the curtains. But also when people are taking their parents or their elderly family members out of assisted living and they're bringing them into the home, all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't just parenting, this is caregiving. And so
Yes.
the rise of caregiving as an umbrella, I think is
Mm.
going to help accelerate these conversations and these transitions and all of those pieces, because people that take care of parents and aging family members and all of those things are historically left behind because they're not a parent, so you don't fit the parent category.
Yes.
But what's the difference, right? Like you're taking care of somebody who can't take care of
It's
themselves or that needs help. So
yes.
I got a big
And
soapbox for this.
no, and I agree, right? And widening the language. I was reflecting on this recently, right? Like I have had to have 5 knee surgeries since I was 13.
Oh my
And
gosh.
2 of those were when I was in my 20s. And I was not in
Hmm.
a like I had my husband at the time was my boyfriend, but we weren't living together and I needed a full-time caregiver for the first
Yeah.
month after that surgery. And thankfully, my stepmother at the time was retired and I was able to move back home with my parents at the age of 27, right? And she had to care for me. And I'm like, that's care work, right?
Hmm.
What would I have done? I lived on the 3rd floor of a Boston apartment that I would have never been able to access given, the extent of my surgery. Like, I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have that option of care. And so I think we forget about these things too. Like, even when we are young and, able bodied, we can come into injuries and need care, right? It's like there's so many things that I think we kind of, by just focusing on the parent, we forget and we leave out when it comes to this care economy and needing care.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like it's a great, you know, parents need programs. We need childcare. We need, I mean, I hope that by the time this airs that it's not the case, but like, stuff doesn't happen overnight. But it now costs more for childcare in this country in all 50 states than rent. Like it's
Yes.
literally a financial like impossibility to have children in some places because you cannot. And then that's a whole
Yes.
rabbit hole in terms of
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
the momentum behind parenting and the momentum behind care work when it comes to parenting and putting programs into place and all that stuff, that's why I am leaning really heavily into those pieces, because that is going to be the thing that parts the seas for everybody else behind it, because
Yes.
now we are at this place where like you can't just say, oh, that's your choice, or oh, that's a you problem, not a me problem. This is an everybody problem, because there is no childcare infrastructure in this country that meets the needs of children today and parents today. And so once we start to put those in place, it's easier to say like caregiving for the elderly is an adjacent market, basically,
Yeah.
where we
Yeah.
can just say, okay, well, this looks like this, and here's how we're going to pull this into this and
Yes.
and make it make sense. And I think that eventually we are going to get to a place where we are meeting the needs of caregivers and parents coming first. Like I will happily hold the door for all of the programs and all of the solutions that come into place to make it easier, because it's just not, it's impossible right now.
It's impossible, right? And it's a crisis because
Mm.
when there is not childcare, then people are not entering the workforce. When there is not affordable and accessible childcare, people are reconsidering having children. That is like directly impacts the economy, right? It directly impacts our ability to like grow as a society. It's like this is a crisis. And I hope that more people are seeing that.
Mhm.
My hope too is that, there have been if we just talk about the state of New Hampshire, right? I think the state of New Hampshire has created a child care task force because they recognize that this is a crisis. But some of the recommendations for making things better have been to increase ratio sizes, right? Or to expand access to the amount of children that in-home childcare providers can take on in addition to their own children. And that scares me too, right? Because it's like that is if I were to come in and say, okay, these are the solutions that I actually want to see in order to make childcare more
Mhm.
affordable and accessible in our state, that is not it. Because if you talk to any child care provider, they are already early child care provider, they're already drowning in work, right? And their hours are so long, and increasing the ratio size is not the solution here. So I think as we are taking this on and acknowledging that it is a crisis, it's also so important to actually put in programs and changes and funding that helps get at the root, not just band-aid it or make things worse in
Yeah.
childcare sectors.
Yeah, and it's yeah, it's got
It's
to be
tricky.
like
It's
the
all so tricky.
idea of like
Yeah.
the solutions that we come up with right now, and the solutions that we put into place are going to be rough. It's like
Yeah.
that, like it's going to get worse before it gets better, because like when you have to rework a system and there's upheaval, and there's a tendency to be like, well, that's not working, so let's just do this for now. So yeah, yeah, definitely a long range forecast is the way to
Yep.
go.
And I think it's exciting, right? Like you and I met at the Boston Chamber of Mothers meeting where that chapter has been established for over a year. And just for listeners who are not familiar with the Chamber of Mothers, it's a nonprofit organization that was formed in 2021 by a group of moms who have large motherhood platforms on Instagram. And actually, all of them were tapped individually when paid family medical leave was being considered in the Build Back Better bill. And they were tapped to say, hey, like, get your following behind this, make sure that they are contacting their lawmakers to tell them that this is important. And so they all kind of came together and did that. And then, unfortunately, as we all know, paid family medical leave was stripped from the Build Back Better bill. The group of moms said, hey, you know what? We're not going to let this deflate us. In fact, we are going to let this like inspire us, and we're going to come together and approach this in a different way, right? We are going to take this on. And so they formed the Chamber of Mothers, and the three pillars that the organization stands for are really advocating for paid family medical leave for all, affordable and accessible childcare, and improved maternal health outcomes. All three pillars so important in our
Hmm.
society, and really getting us to value that care work. And so we have brought a chapter to New Hampshire as of last month. And so I think having that support from the national nonprofit to approach some of these things on the local New Hampshire level will just be really, really powerful. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I love that there's chapters that are kind of popping up all over the place now that these big national issues have come to light. Now that there's a following of people that are saying, "Hey, wait a second, this doesn't really work, and here's what I can do about it." But also, like my neighbor down the street and the other parents at my school and all of that are also having these same concerns and living the same experience. And so, how do we put it all together?
Yes. And one thing I'm learning is just that, like, there are so many amazing programs and organizations in the state of New Hampshire that are doing really fabulous work around care, right? But so many people are just not aware of them, right? Like I
Yeah.
didn't realize that DHHS actually published their child care plan for 2024 to 2027 just a few weeks ago, right? And it's actually up for review right now. So New Hampshire families can provide feedback on it. And had I not been involved in the Chamber of Mothers and this work, I would have never known that that was happening. And so I think a big part of a big goal for me as like one of the co-leaders of the New Hampshire chapter is finding all of this greatness that already exists and this hard work that is happening and surface it to the masses. Because we, as whether you are a parent or just, not a parent, we are all so busy, right? It's
Hmm.
so hard to find information. And in those little spurts of free time, that's not what we're going to be doing, right? It's like we need a go-to place where we can get access to this in a really easy way. And so that is one of my goals, is really to just make some of this amazing work that other organizations in the state that already existed have been doing this work for so long, make sure that everyday people, right, are able to access it.
Yeah, for that, like, to that end, people saying like, "Oh, we're a small state," and they say like, "Well, what are we doing here?" Or the assumption is like nothing is being done because you can't see
Yeah.
anything. So when you
Right.
start to say, "Okay, guys, no, like this is happening. Here's where it is." That helps build that momentum and bring people on board to say, "Oh, okay, wait, we already have this stuff going on." So now when you have people that are coming in, they're not saying, "Okay, we have to like start from scratch." We're actually a few rungs up the ladder. We just didn't know where the ladder was because the internet
Yes.
is great. However, it's everywhere. And if you don't have a way to pull it all together, then you can't. You can't
Exactly.
because it's just rabbit holes.
Yes. And we're all so busy, right? It's like everybody's in their own swim lane. And so I hope that as like the Chamber of Mothers in New Hampshire can really pull together some of the resources, some of the contacts, the people, the work, because I know that that's what the organization is so good at on the national level, right? Like
Hmm.
going to Capitol Hill and we're a bipartisan group, right? So it's like meeting with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, talking to them, hearing what is important to them. What do they value? What are their goals? What are the big things that they're working towards? And finding the commonalities and bringing them together in those common spaces. Even though, it may feel like there are so many differences, there are so many similar values and so many things that we are working and value on, like similarly, no matter what side of the aisle you kind of fall on. And so my hope is we can do very similar things on the state level.
Yeah, I love that.
I
So
know.
when you are not advocating, when you are not pulling it all together, what what does that look like for you? So you have, I mean, you are clearly a mom because I don't know if anyone knows this, but it's legitimately the only qualification that you need to come on this podcast. Um,
Love
because,
it.
well, for a lot of reasons. One is that I think, I want to amplify the voices of moms. But also the other part is like, I think that it's really easy to sort of go down the podcast rabbit hole where like all of a sudden it becomes this like, I'm here to help moms, and it's like, do you have kids? And they're like, no, I don't, but I just work with moms. And you're like, no, I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
I wanna have voices on here of people that are living the experience, and it doesn't necessarily mean that like you don't have to be doing, national level policy work and be a mom. I want the stories of how that impacts people on a day-to-day basis and what some of these pieces are, and this idea of like, individuality and
Yes.
meeting those needs on that level. So, to that end, what is your day-to-day non-advocacy, what does that look like for you? Like how's the lived experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? It's like figuring out a way to integrate it all is really hard because to your point, there are so many things that are important to me. And so my day to day looks very different. I guess the consistent parts of it are my daughter is in childcare. We are so grateful to have found an amazing childcare center near us. But I will say that we were on a wait list. We went on 4 wait lists when I was 7 weeks pregnant. And my daughter did not get full-time care until she was a year old. So yeah, crazy, right? And so but we are very happy she is there. She's 19 months old. We drop her off. My husband does drop off around 7:45 in the morning. I do pick up at 3:55. So I have that window of like 7:45 to 3:30 where I get to choose my day looks like. And I'll say, right, like it varies. Sometimes it is more heavy on the home stuff, navigating laundry and just all the things, right? And then a lot of days it is heavy on the paid work side. And so I coach. A lot of times I partner with women who are in heavily male dominated career spaces because that comes with its own unique challenges. Before I started my own business, I actually spent 11 years in software sales. And so I think that background helps me support women who are trying to navigate just how complicated it is to be a parent, a caregiver, a human, and feel fulfilled in your career and your work. And then I also do partner with organizations to help them make their workspaces more care friendly. So that is where the fair play stuff comes in. I don't oftentimes work with couples on fair play, but I bring it to organizations, oftentimes their leadership teams or their employee resource groups. And we can go into fair play if you think that would be helpful. But it really depends, right? Like I'm sharing this because it's like, oh my gosh, I don't even know half the time, right? Like what the day, of course, I have my meetings that are set up and things that are in place often, but it's so variable, which I'm sure you can relate to because you just never know. Like the other day, I got a call in the middle of the day from my daughter's daycare and there was like a little incident where she got an injury and then you have to deal with that, right? You just never know what is going to pop up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's that idea of like, best laid plans when it comes to doing all of this, doing the having children and having and working and whatever that looks like. Because I think too, like, you know, I love the idea of like before you have kids, it's like, okay, like I'll put them on a wait list and like when they're born, then they'll go when they're, however old that they are. And then you get into these situations where you're like,
Oh,
okay, they're
wait.
born now. It's been 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, a year, whatever it is that where the idea is because we have no paid leave. Whenever your job calls and says, "Hey, we need you back in here like now." And you're like, "But I can't because I'm still doing we have no." And
Stuff.
then yeah, like I'm unless you want me to bring this baby in,
Yeah.
here's where I am. And that is something that so many people navigate from a personal, emotional, financial, career, all of those pieces. So I think, the more light that gets shone on that and the more we talk about like the commonalities there. And then to your end, like you go into a company and you say, okay, this is something that can happen. This is something
Yeah.
that probably does happen. This is
Yes.
something that if it hasn't happened yet, good for you, but you need a plan in place for when this happens. So you're really affecting change from such an important and like sort of linchpin moment for people in their careers because like I can't tell you how many moms that I have talked to where it's like here is the plan that I had in place because this was my plan when I went into having to like
Yep.
thinking about having a baby, getting pregnant, whatever that process is because the
Yep.
IVF on
Yep.
layer on top of that is
Yep.
massive. And
Yep.
then I had a plan for what my return to work was going to be. Oh, by the way, childcare it all fell through. COVID, we've 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 all
Yes.
navigated this like firestorm of stuff over the last couple of years. And so how do you how do you help change the culture for people that come behind you so that the company can say, you know what, we understand that this is something that happens sometimes. And while it's not ideal because we needed you back for this, for this, for this, let's figure out a plan so that we can have you back in a
Yes.
time that works or something
Yeah.
new.
Yes.
That's
It's
amazing.
so, I, you're spot on, right? Because so many families are navigating this. So many families are having to spend so much time and energy on piecing together care because they
Hmm.
do want to have a career, right? They do want to be a parent. And in our country, because we don't have accessible and affordable childcare and we don't have paid family medical leave for all, that is so hard and so complicated. And so, so many, like, just think about the time and energy that it takes to reconfigure that plan that you had in place. And then you're like, oh my gosh, it's falling through. You've got to, one, see if there's any family member that might be able to help. That's only a small subset of people that have grandparents or family members nearby that are retired or can jump in or even physically able to help with children. If
Hmm.
that's not the case, then you have to have a conversation. Okay, who is going to maybe drop down to part-time, right? And oftentimes that falls on the mother because of the expectations of our society, right? And how we oftentimes think about our paychecks as separate. Like, well, it doesn't make sense for me to work because I don't make enough money, me as in mom, to justify the childcare costs. In
Hmm.
my perfect world, we would never frame it like that. We would say, okay, how much income does our family bring in collectively, right?
Hmm.
And does it make sense for us to collectively send looking at that in a one number sum, our child to child care, not one salary versus the other, because that's where we get really stuck in these situations where someone feels like their going to work is not justified, right? Which is just so unfair if that's not a feeling that somebody wants to have. So
Hmm.
I think the bringing the awareness to it is the first piece, right? So that's what I oftentimes will do with organizations. It's like, look, you may not be experiencing this yourself, but let's create a survey that we can send out to your people and see how many people are being impacted by the lack of childcare affordability or access inside of your organization. And organizations are floored by how many people are having to navigate all of these things and that are
Yeah.
having to come up with creative solutions. And I don't think there are some organizations out there that I have partnered with that have like childcare subsidies or they have like emergency childcare solutions so that, day of you can call and your child can get access to childcare. But I don't know any organization that is doing it like really, really well. And again, right? Like it's like, the question is, should that even fall on the organization? Because then you only have access to that if you are tied to that organization. And what if things aren't working in other areas and you want to go someplace else, but you're stuck there because they help you with right? It's all just so complicated if it's not addressed at the kind of the national level.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like, I mean, full disclosure, like my company, not this podcast, but my company is care tech. So it's care tech that is targeted towards HR so that people can say it's logistics. So it is a care tech platform for people to be able to streamline the logistics of caregiving. And that's parenting and care for aging family members as part of that sandwich generation. Right. So there's that, like that is
Yes.
this is my wheelhouse and I love this place and I want to affect change as well. Like I think you and I are sort of running along in the same, our swim lanes are going in the same direction. But also I was in getting ready for, meeting with companies and things like that. You look at like the HR benefits and you look at people, what people are asking for versus what companies are offering and things like that. And there's been, a good number of studies that have been done. One of
Yeah.
the ones that I was reading was about it's somewhere in around 44% of employees do not feel like their HR benefits that are offered meet their needs as caregivers.
Yeah.
So that's a good chunk of your
That's
organization,
a good
right?
job. And that's only the people that feel like they can answer that honestly, right?
Yeah, because that's again like the statistics that follows that is, and I don't remember, but it is well over 50% of people feel like they can't interact with their employer around caregiving needs because they think that once they admit or they disclose or whatever that they have caregiving requirements, that they will automatically get put into that tract of like overlooked for promotion. They will have things that are sort of taken off their plate because someone has made a judgment on their behalf that they would be unable to fulfill these requirements because they may need to get pulled out for caregiving and things like that. So the bias is has to be targeted at a very cellular level in order for people to say, in order for people to be feel comfortable to say, you know what, I am a caregiver and I need different things. Like I need access to day of childcare. I need assistance with a platform that I can manage, my kid, my parents, myself, and still show up at work in the way that you guys need me to show up because I'm here. I need a job. I mean, and our country is not really an affordable place for families if
No.
you only have a single income coming
Yeah.
in. Like those days are long gone. The days
Long
in
gone.
which the days in which companies ran based on a single income family are over. However, the benefits that companies offer to people are still structured in that way. So
Even the
it's
timing, right? Like what about the school day, right? The
yeah.
school day ends at 3 o'clock,
Mhm.
like then families have to navigate a whole after school care
And those
plan,
programs are full too.
right? Those programs are full. Summer camps fill up. Parents are going online at midnight
Mhm.
to secure summer camps in January, right? Or
Yes.
before.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then they sell out. And then what?
Mhm.
Right? It's like it's not, I think we're speaking the same language, right? It's just not, things are not aligning, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's just so hard. It's so hard. And then it when you compile certain things like economic status, right? Race, like all of those things, like it makes it even more challenging because
Mhm.
I know that we are only in the childcare center that we're able to get into because we could afford it and it's expensive and it's just so unfair, that also your income and your privilege play such a role in your access to these things.
Right. And that's why on a national level you start to be able to filter out these pieces, right? It's like you have access to care no matter where you work, no matter where you live, no matter, all of that in an established care system. I'm not saying like that, tomorrow they vote and they say, okay, everyone has care and all of a sudden like a child care center pops up. That's going to meet you where you need to. I think too, like, so this last winter, I missed and like I live this example so much because I have 4 kids. And so the idea of like moving camp around and swapping and things like that, like I work for myself because there is no aftercare option that's going to meet
Yep.
the needs of my family. I missed the window of a summer camp in New Hampshire. I missed the window of the sign up for a summer camp in New Hampshire, the early window requiring you to become a member of that organization. So pay a fee.
Yep.
The sign up goes out 3 days beforehand before the like regular public sign up goes out. I missed the like opening time to sign up by 15 minutes. It was sold out the entire summer. All ages, all grades, all levels, 15 minutes sold out for a
Yep.
9 to 3 camp. If you want before and after care, it's additional. It's
Right.
$475 for 5 days of 9 to 3
Addition.
camp.
Oh my
Per kid,
gosh.
per kid,
Yeah.
per week. Yeah.
And
It's
and
like,
it's crazy, but then the fact that it sells out in 15 minutes like that shows us what a crisis this is.
yes.
Shows us like what how many people are struggling with this. But the way that it's all structured is, okay, only these super, super organized people that have set the alarm and have the
Yeah.
funds to be able to make this happen can have their needs met. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, how is that? How is this how it works? I
Yeah. The
just,
divide just grows.
yeah, the divide just grows. And then if you do miss that window, if you were even able to access that window in the first place, and then you miss it, then all of the time and energy that you have to spend when you don't have any of that as it is to reconfigure the plan, right? And so then we wonder, like, why are mothers so burnt out? Why is there, so much depression and anxiety in our society, right? It's like because we're all having to navigate all of these barriers constantly in getting our needs met in terms of how we want to care for our families. It's exhausting and it's tiring and it's like deflating. On a positive note, right? Like, I do feel like there are so many of us that are trying to bring awareness to this, right? There are
Mhm.
so many of us that are designating our life really to this work because it's that important. And, I oftentimes think of like, okay, when hopefully many, many, many years from now, when I am ready to leave this earth, I will be able to reflect back on my life and see it in a way that like I feel really proud of how I lived it and that I really wanted to create a world that felt better and was more fair for my daughter Vivian at this time. She's our only child right now. So it's like that's just what I want to create. That legacy is what keeps me going. It's what drives me every single day. And I do have to say, I know you touched on it a little bit, like that real self-care piece too. Like, how does that fit into all of this? Because it's like, yeah, I've got the paid work and the family life and the advocacy stuff and all of that. I do also really, really prioritize time and space for myself and time and space for my partnership. And that's
Mhm.
hard too, especially given all of the demands that we have and all of the kind of inequities that exist in our country. But it's like, I know for myself personally, I can't show up as like the mother, the advocate, the employee that I want to if I don't make sure my cup is full too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like the interesting thing about having so many different ages and stages of motherhood represented when people come on here is that looks different. And I think that's the message that I want people to take away always is that that looks different for everybody. And that's the point, right? Because the marketing and the consumerism and the commercial side of self-care is you are told that whatever you're doing is wrong
Yep.
and it's not enough and you are not meeting your own needs in order to meet your own needs in a way that is right, in a way that is good, a way that is valid. It involves buying into whatever solution that company is selling. And so I think that there's a tendency or there's an ease, not a tendency, but it's easy to look at something like that that's being marketed to you and say, wow, what I'm doing is not enough or what I'm doing is not right because they're telling me like we are all impacted by messaging. We are and it's also like we drink from a fire hose when it comes to like marketing every day. And so the idea is like okay, we're trying our very best and like what
Yep.
looks good for me is not
Yes.
going to look good for you and what looks good for you it may not work for me but that there's such an individual perspective and an individual honoring of self that needs to happen in order to fill that cup. Like
Yes.
what was going to fill my cup is not going to fill yours.
100%. And to your point, right? Like acknowledging that self-care is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? So it's like
Yeah.
there are so many companies that are selling us self-care with their interests in mind, not ours, right? And
Mhm.
so, of course, you're going to see all of this, like these things that say, well, if you just had this coffee cup that kept your coffee warm, or if you just had this bubble bath, you would feel more relaxed, or if you just invested in, this yoga retreat, right? And I'm not saying that those things can't make you feel good, right? But if you do those things and you still don't feel good, that's also okay, because that's not
Mhm.
actually what might be what you, like you said, you need. I don't know if you have read Dr.
Yeah.
Pooja Lakshmi's book, Real Self-Care, but that reading
Mhm.
that book was like such a light bulb experience for me, because I was like, she says, real self-care is boundaries, being really, secure and defined by your values, and practicing self-compassion. And when those three things are in place, like those are the real elements of self-care, you can then step into your power. And that, like, now that I think of real self-care in that way, I I I just don't subscribe to so many of the things that I used to in order to make myself feel better. My first thought is, okay, what boundary do I need to put in place? Right? Like, what boundary do I need to put in
Mhm.
place in order to care for myself? And what values are going to drive that boundary? And then how do I ask for help and not feel guilty? That's the self-compassion piece, right? When I need to ask for help to put this boundary in place to, like, care for myself. It's fascinating, but it has been just so transformational. So, anyone out there, I would highly recommend that book.
Yeah, I do. I just read that actually not that long ago, and the thing that I really liked about the book was that it is such an emphasis on the idea of, like, it's calming yourself doesn't mean, like, a face mask, and
Right.
sort of getting the inside of you down to a more neutral space, like where you are not overstimulated, when you are not overextended, when you are not exhausted, when you are not like someone is not tap dancing on your last nerve. Like, getting yourself to those spaces involves involves those things, involves the boundaries, involves compassion, involves all of that stuff. But none of that involves one single dollar.
Right.
And that's the message, right? It's like, it costs
Yes.
$0 to take care of yourself. Now,
Mhm.
that also, like, I gotta put a big caveat around that, because that sounds obnoxious, to say. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
taking care of yourself, like, that is the assumption that there is financial security, that there is
Yeah.
housing security, that there is, some sort of
Food.
care,
Yeah.
food, all
Yeah.
of those things, right? So,
Basic needs are being met.
yeah, so once you have your basic needs, because then I think so often that's where the lane starts to diverge for people. It's like, if you have insecurity, not like, oh, I feel nervous, but like if you have actual physical, financial, food insecurity in that space, on top of that, you're still subjected to the messaging of buy this, do this, go here, all of those things in order to be whole. It feels like these two things are never going to meet each other. And
Yeah.
so what I liked about her book is, like, it's saying, if you are here, if you are in this space of trying to, meet the needs of your children, meet the needs of yourself, secure housing, all of those things, you don't actually need any of that
Yeah.
to take care of yourself, when you're in this space. So no matter what it looks like not everyone's like hopping on a yacht and going to Greece. That
Even
doesn't
though it
mean that
looks
those
like it
people
on
are
Instagram.
it Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my god. But the like that you're those people aren't meeting their needs better than you are, because your needs are so basic as human beings. Like, we used to wander around, we had no homes, we had no nothing. Like, we used to wander around and eat berries and hunt animals. And those
Yes.
people weren't like, "Oh my god, I really wish I could get a pedicure." Right? Like, they're not
Right.
better off for it. I can't imagine
No.
what their feet look like, but
I know, right? Like,
But,
I
like, the idea of taking care of yourself from that basic level, from the, like, wanderers of humans, is something going to eat me? Can I eat something? Can I live in a place where I'm protected from the elements? And can I like leave my children in this place while I go and find food and all of that stuff? It's the same thing. It's just we live in fancier times.
Yes, yes, yes. Exactly, right? And the real self-care, or not in quotes, the real self-care, not the self-care in quotes, is could just be, I love how she mentioned this, like the pause, right? Allowing your body to regulate, acknowledging that you are in stress and reaction mode and
Mhm.
giving yourself grace and permission and a little tiny bit of time to come down into response, right? And doing that by pausing. And so I loved how she said the boundary can be the pause, right? Like that,
Yeah.
and that was like, I was like, wait, what? Like that's as simple
That's
as it
also
can be.
free.
Like, wait, that's free. Pausing and just not reacting
Mhm.
out of stress, taking a beat and saying like, you know what? I'm going to sit on this. I'm going to get my body to a place that feels regulated. And then I'm going to think about it and respond. Like that is real self-care. And imagine if we all were able to do that more, how much like stress and pain and suffering we would save ourselves because we wouldn't be ruminating
Mhm.
about how we reacted. We wouldn't be replaying the thing that we did when we wish we hadn't, because we would have allowed our body the ability to regulate and get to a place where we could respond from a place that aligned with our values and the way we actually wanted to. That
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
whoa.
I think, yeah, because I think there's two things, right? Like you have two choices. In any situation, you have two choices. You have track A and track B. Track A is stimulus of some kind that elicits a response, and you immediately react without considering the who, what, where, when, why, right? And
Yep.
so if the response doesn't match the stimulus, then the work begins, or then the energy burn begins in what you're talking about, like the rumination piece. Like that's
Yes.
when you get stuck in that like tailspin of like, I wish I had said this, I wish I had done this, all of those things. And I think that like Dr. Becky is killing the game right now because she's the one who's like, all right, so you got stuck there.
Yep.
Now we're going to talk about repair. Now we're going to talk
Yes.
about conversations. Now we're going to talk about like how all that works.
Yes.
And what Pooja is saying is there is a track B, and track B is stimulus that elicits a response, pause to
Mhm.
like sort your stuff out and how you want to
Yep.
come at this and all of this stuff. And then you have your reaction,
Yes.
which leads to no rumination. And I think that
Right.
that it's important to have those two there, that you're saying, all right, am I in track A or am I in track B? Do I want to spend the energy in between stimulus and reaction, or do I want to spend the energy afterwards going, oh, I really wish I didn't say that. I wish I did not do all of that stuff. How could I do this? Blah, blah, blah. That's, brings on all the shame and all of
Yes.
those pieces and
Yep.
the repair work that has to be done. So it's trying to move. We're not gonna live all in track B. So
No.
it's trying to figure out how we can move our track A to track B, but also having a solution for track A.
Yeah, and recognizing that we're human and we're gonna
Yeah.
react, right? It's like
Yeah.
we are. But even with we're a huge Dr. Becky family fan, good inside members. We love her. It's like I have been finding though, even with my 19-month-old daughter, right? Like as she is developing, gaining more language, right? Like knowing what she wants, she is eliciting I am like reacting to her frustrations. I am reacting to her demands, right? And sometimes those are triggering, and I've had to be like, why is this triggering? Is it like something, probably something inside of me that I'm seeing that is I need to process, right? And so
Mhm.
I've been actually taking a beat with her, like using the pause as the boundary. And she, as long as she is safe, right? I and something happens where my default would be to react or say something maybe in a tone that I didn't want to, I'm just saying, Vivi, mommy's going to step out of the room for just a second. I'll be right back. And I'm like, okay, take a breath. How do I actually want to show up with her right now? And it's just a matter of like 30 seconds, right? But it's giving me that ability to calm my nervous system, get me to a place where I want to actually engage with her and step back in to respond. So it's like, it's just so powerful because especially with these little ones, I mean, I'm learning it. I'm a new mother, right? Like, oh my gosh, they can press your buttons like constantly for an hour.
Oh, they don't
Yeah.
push them. They tap dance on them.
They are
Yeah.
like relentless. And it's hard. It is like impossible to stay even keeled through it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know a human being that can do that. And so having these, to your point, these two strategies, one being that if you can find the pause and regulate. If you can't and you do react, like be compassionate with yourself and you can always come back and repair.
Yeah. I think that like the trifecta of books that have come out that I think really sort of get to the heart of a lot of it. So there's Dr. Becky's book, Pooja's book. And I also think, and it's not a new one, but Dr. Kristen Neff, she does Fearless Self-Compassion. So those three together, I feel like that it does a really good job of like creating kind of like the bubble wrap that you need to be able to understand like your reaction, the things that are happening and the interactions between those. So if I will link all of those in the show notes, but I think that if you are looking for like oh my gosh, what the heck am I doing? How am I going about this? Like those are three places that I would start.
Yeah.
Because I think even though they weren't written by the same people, they all sort of intersect really well together.
I love it. Yes. And it's funny, Dr. Kristen Neff, I use some of her research and in some of my workshops, but I haven't actually read that full book. So I'll have to, that will be.
Yeah. It's really good. She has a couple, but the Fearless Self-Compassion is a really good one.
Okay. I love that. Oh, man.
I love it.
I could chat with you forever.
Well, I know. We could just leave this thing running. Like the podcast that never ends. So for people that, because we are both in New Hampshire, there's going to be, hopefully there's people in New Hampshire that want to learn more about Chamber of Mothers. So in the vein of show notes, where can people find you? The work that you do with Fair Play, the work that you do with the Chamber, all of those pieces. And I will link everything in the show notes, but just tell people where they can find you. Please.
Awesome. Yes. So I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Tara Ryan. My company's name is Infinity. And sometimes it's hard for people they're like, what is it? Because I spell it with DEI at the end for diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the name really sparked from, in order to be able to find our infinity potential, we really have to be rooted in care, right? And taking care of ourselves. And so that is my company name. So my website, infinity.com, is where you can find a lot of information about me. And then Infinity, also my handle on Instagram. So I am very active there. So everything will be linked in the show notes, but I would love for all of you to follow along, reach out to me. And as for the Chamber, we actually have a form that I'll share with you that people can fill out if they want to be added to the newsletter, right? And information about future chapter meetings. And then we also just share if there are legislative updates or things that families might want to be aware of. Like I was saying, aggregating that content, that will be a big part of the strategy, just a general awareness. So I'll share that too. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fabulous. What a great way to start the day. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I love the work that you're doing. I think that the more people that are saying, you know what, I want a better way forward, for my kids. I want a better way forward for me. I want a better way forward for my neighbor. I don't have kids, but I want a better way forward. I think that the more that we are able to come together collectively, the better we're all going to be in the collective outcome. So thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you for all the work you do as well, right? We're in this together.